Okay, we're going to finish up with Chapter 11 today. This is Part 3. And we left off last time talking about beta, and that's where we're going to pick up right now. So beta, as you might remember, is a measure of how an investment will do in relation to the overall stock market. And it's a historical measure. It's based on some time period in the past. And of course, the stock or the investment may not react exactly as we think. But this is a historical measure. So beta, if the beta of a company is 1.0, we are saying that it will pretty much move in sync with the market. So if the stock market is up 1.2%, then this stock should be up 1.2% also. If the beta is 2, then the stock should move up at twice the rate of the market. And if the beta is less than 1, then the stock would move up at a slower rate than the market. And then all that is true for the downside. Now there is a concept called the risk premium. If you were to invest in any kind of asset, you would want to get some kind of premium, something extra above and beyond what you could get by investing in a risk-free instrument. And let's go back to what a risk-free instrument is. That would be something like a U.S. Treasury bill, something that you're guaranteed you're going to get from the United States government. It's the safest investment out there, and that would be a risk-free investment. And the return you get from that is called the risk-free return. So if you could buy a United States T-bill that's due in 6 months, and sometimes the measure of risk-free might be a different measure than 6 months, but let's assume we're using the 6-month T-bill as the risk-free return, and you could get a 5% annualized return. If you were going to invest in a risky stock, you would want to get something above 5%. Let's assume that you want to buy the Vanguard U.S. Stock Market Index Fund, okay? And let's say the expected return of that fund is 10%. Well, if we take 10% minus the risk-free rate of 5%, we get 5%. And that 5% would be called the risk premium. That's what you would be compensated for by buying the entire U.S. stock market above and beyond buying a U.S. T-bill. Now, what if you bought a stock that has a beta of 1.5? In that case, your risk measured by the beta is greater than buying the U.S. stock market. So theoretically, you should be getting a greater return if you buy that stock. Likewise, if the stock went down, you would be losing more because you're taking on more risk based on a beta of 1.5. Well, the return you should get is based on the formula right down here. And it's saying the expected return of a stock, or any investment really, is equal to the risk-free rate plus the beta times the expected rate of the market minus the risk-free rate. So in this example, if we take a risk-free rate of 5%, and let's assume the market return is 10%. So we take 10% minus 5%, that's 5%. Multiply it times a beta of 1.5, that would give us 7.5%. And then add the risk-free rate of 5%. The expected return for that stock would be 12.5%. So now let's work with the formula a little and see what kind of numbers we get. And for this sequence of examples, we're going to assume a risk-free rate of 5% and the expected market return of 10%. So let's recap the formula. It's the expected return is going to equal the risk-free rate plus the beta of the investment multiplied by the expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate. And the expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate is also called the risk premium. And down below, I highlighted the risk premium in red. So in every case, this bracket is going to be the expected return of the market, which is 10%, minus the risk-free rate, which is going to be 5%. So this will always equal 5%. Now let's say we invest only in the risk-free asset. What will our return be? So the risk-free rate is 5%. Now the beta for a risk-free asset is always 0. So no matter what is in here, it's 0 times whatever number it is, you'll get 0. So 5% plus 0 equals 5%. So the expected return of the risk-free asset is 5%, which makes sense because that's our assumed number, 5%. What about if we invested in the overall market? We bought, let's say, the Vanguard stock index funds, which basically is buying the entire market. It covers every U.S. stock. The expected return is going to equal the 5% risk-free rate. Now the beta of a market index fund will be 1.0 times 5%. So 1.0 times 5% is 5%. Add another 5% for the risk-free rate. You get a return of 10%, which coincidentally equals the expected market return of 10%. What about if we bought a stock of 1.5? I think we just did this previously. You get the risk-free rate of 5% plus 1.5 times the market risk premium is 7.5. So 5% plus 7.5 is going to equal a 12.5% return. And here is a graph of what we just spoke about. Right here you have the risk-free rate, and then you're slowly going to move up as the beta increases. Right here you get the intersection of the beta of 1.0 and the expected market return. And then as you go further along, as the beta increases above 1, your expected return will be greater than 1. This formula, by the way, is called the Capital Asset Pricing Model, the CAPM formula. So that's the formula we've just been working with. And this line here in the graph is called the security market line. And the slope of the security market line is called the reward to risk ratio. And it's simply going to be the expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate divided by the beta of the market. So again, let's go over the CAPM formula. You have the risk-free rate. Then you're going to have the expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate. You're going to multiply that times the beta of the individual security, and that will give you, when you add it to the risk-free rate, that will give you the expected return of the security. And the expected return is also going to be the required return of the asset. So if you're asked to calculate the required return, you can use this CAPM formula to calculate the required return or the expected return. Another important point with the reward to risk ratio is that ratio should be the same for all assets across the investment spectrum. And the reason it should be the same is because if it's out of sync, and if on one particular asset you have a higher reward to risk, then money would flow to that asset because you're getting a greater reward for each unit of risk you're taking. So eventually everything would be in sync, and the reward to risk ratio across all assets should be the same ratio. So those are the highlights for Chapter 11. If you have any questions, please contact me.